President, may we acknowledge, I'm not sure if they're still in the gallery, but I received this paper for the marketing management students of the Polytechnic University of the Philippines, PUP, and the Irrigationist Seminary College headed by Brother Francis Cayao, RCJ. I move for the recognition, Mr. President.
Our guests, as spread into the record by the Majority Leader, are hereby acknowledged and they're welcome to the Senate.
Mr. President, with the consent of the Senate, I move that we resume consideration of Senate Bill 2909 under Committee Report 203. This is the bill on Credit Surety Fund Cooperatives, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, in order.
Mr. President, the parliamentary status is that the sponsor delivered his sponsorship speech last August 19. I thus move that we open the period of interpellations.
Period for interpellation is in order on Senate Bill number 2909.
I move that we recognize the sponsor, Senator Aquino.
Senator Aquino is recognized.
Mr. President, no one has indicated their intention to interpolate.
Mr. President, in view of the manifestation of the sponsor, I move that we close the period of interpellations.
Any objection? Hearing none, period for interpellation is terminated.
Mr. President, I move that we open the period for committee amendments.
Period for committee amendments is in order.
Mr. President, we have no committee amendments.
There are no committee amendments.
Mr. President, I move that we close the period of committee amendments and open the period for individual amendments.
Any objection? Hearing none, period for committee amendments is terminated. Period for individual amendments is in order.
Mr. President, the sponsor is indicating that there are no individual amendments. Oh, there are individual, I'm sorry. I move that we, in such view, I move that we suspend or close the period of individual amendments in the meantime.
Right. I'm sorry, what do we do now?
There are apparently some individual amendments, but
right.
to be proposed on another day. So in view of that, I move that we close the period and suspend consideration of Senate Bill 2909.
We have closed the period for committee amendments. We are now going to suspend consideration of the measure to allow our colleagues to submit their individual amendments at the next session. So consideration of the measure is hereby suspended.
Mr. President, with the consent of the Senate, I move that we resume consideration of Senate Bill 2835 under Committee Report 177. This is the bill on anti-ambulance chasing, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, consideration of the measure is in order.
Mr. President, the parliamentary status of the measure is that we are in the period of individual amendments. I thus move for recognition as the sponsor, as the acting chair of the Committee on Labor, Mr. President.
The acting chair of the Committee on Labor and the acting majority leader is recognized.
Thank you, sir. I'm doing a lot of acting today, Mr.
Yes.
President. There are amendments, and I just like to confirm that that we received this from the office of the Senate President. And if I may proceed, Mr. President, using the September 7 copy.
Yes.
Thank you,
Please.
Mr. President.
Yes.
Amendments to Section 2 on page 1, line 3, after the word prohibition to replace the word of with on.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
On the same page, line 5, after seafarers, to delete the phrase and other workers similarly situated.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
On page 1, line 6, after against, replace an employer with their employers.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
On page 1, line 9, add S to seafarer to make it plural.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
The same page, from lines 9 to 10, delete the phrase or other workers similarly situated.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
On the same page, Mr. President, line 10, before heirs, to insert their.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
On the same page, line 10, after the word heirs, to delete the word thereof.
Insert the word thereof. Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
On the same page, Mr. President, from lines 10 to 12, to delete the following sentence. The Secretary of Labor and Employment shall, through the appropriate rules and regulations, determine such other workers similarly situated as seafarers using reasonable criteria.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
So the section will now read as follows, Mr. President. Prohibition on ambulance chasing. It shall be unlawful for any person to engage in ambulance chasing or the act of soliciting personally or through an agent from seafarers or their heirs the pursuit of any claim against their employers for the purpose of recovery of monetary claim or benefit, including legal interest arising from accident, illness, or death in exchange of an amount or fee which shall be retained or deducted from the monetary claim or benefit granted to or awarded to the seafarers or their heirs.
Duly
That is the
noted.
new. Mr. President, if I may proceed, on page 1, line 14, this is the section 3. To delete the title of the section and replace with the new title, imposition of excessive fees.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
On the same page, line 14, before the word any, to insert the word when.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
On the same page, line 15, after the word between, to replace the with a.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
On the same page, line 15, to delete or other workers similarly situated.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
On the same page, on line 15, before the word heirs, to replace their with his/her.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
On the same page, line 15, after the word and, to replace the with a.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
On page 2, line 4, after disputes, to replace the word stipulating with stipulates.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
On the same page, line 5, after fees, to delete the word exceeding and insert the following, comma, such fees shall not exceed.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
On the same page, line 6, to delete the phrase other worker or.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
On the same page, line 6, before the word heirs, to insert his/her.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
On the same page, line 7, Mr. President, delete the phrase thereof shall be null and void.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
On the same page, from line 7 to 9, to delete the sentence starting from this fee on line 7 up to the word case on line 9.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
On the same page, line 13, to delete the phrase other workers similarly situated.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
On the same page, line 13, before heirs, to insert his/her.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
On the same page, line 13, after the word heirs, to delete thereof.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
Mr. President, if I may read section 3.
Please proceed, yes.
Section 3, imposition of excessive fees. When any contract or arrangement between a seafarer or his/her heirs and the person who appears for or represents them in any case for recovery of monetary claim or benefit, including legal interest arising from accident, illness, or death, before the National Labor Relations Commission, NLRC, or any labor arbiter, the National Conciliation and Mediation Board, NCMB, the Philippine Overseas Employment Administration, POEA, the Department of Labor and Employment, DOLE, or its regional offices or other quasi-judicial bodies handling labor disputes, stipulates that the person who appears for or represents them shall be entitled to fees, comma, such fees shall not exceed 10% of the compensation or benefit awarded to the seafarer or his or her heirs. For purposes of this act, fees referred to in this section shall mean the total amount of compensation of the person who appears for or represents the seafarer or his/her heirs for services rendered. End of the section.
Duly noted.
Now, if we may proceed to section 4, Mr. President, on page 2, line 15, to delete the phrase and section 3.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
Amendments to section 5, Mr. President, on page 2, line 24, after the word marina, to insert the word and.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
On the same page, line 25, Mr. President, after POEA, to delete the phrase and appropriate labor organizations.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
Mr. President, the next amendment is for the insertion of a new section 7, which shall read as follows. Effectivity clause. This act shall take effect 15 days after its publication in the official gazette or in at least 2 newspapers of general circulation.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved. 1 minute suspension with the permission of the chamber.
Ready to resume, Mr. President.
Session resumed.
Mr. President, an anterior amendment, please, if we may be permitted.
Please proceed.
On page 1, between lines 2 and 3, to insert a new section 2, which shall read as follows, subject to style. Declaration of policy. It shall be the policy of the state to promote and protect every Filipino seafarer desiring to work overseas by securing the best possible terms and conditions of employment, as some lawyers have taken advantage of the plight of our seafarers who met an accident, illness, or death in the course of their service. To exploit the compensation system, these law practitioners have purposely sought excessive labor claims not commensurate to their actual entitlement, if not at all bogus. Unwittingly, our seafarers have fallen prey to this scheme, enticed by the promise of huge monetary award. Apparently, these ambulance chasers do not only resort to this unacceptable practice, but also charge exorbitant legal fees.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
Mr. President, if we may make a omnibus motion to renumber the sections accordingly. So move.
Approved. Is there a proposed amendment to section 1, which is on line 1 of page 1? This is the title of the...
Yes, Mr. President. That's
the
we've saved that for last. To replace the title, the Anti-Ambulance Chasing Act, with the word Seafarers Protection Act.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
Now we move to the title, Mr. President. If we would amend it to an act protecting seafarers against ambulance chasing and imposition of excessive fees and providing penalties thereof.
Any
No.
object-
I'm sorry, Mr. President. May I have 1 minute suspension?
1 minute suspension.
Ready to resume, Mr. President.
Session is resumed.
Amendments to the title, so it should read as follows: an act protecting seafarers against ambulance chasing and imposition of excessive fees and providing penalties therefore.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. There are no other individual amendments. I move that we close the period for individual amendments.
Period for individual amendments is terminated.
I don't think there are other members who wish to provide or propose individual amendments, Mr. President. I move that we vote on second reading the proposed measure, Senate Bill 2835.
There is a motion that we approve on second reading Senate Bill 2835. Any objection? Hearing none. Approved.
Mr. President, before we take up the next matter...
Can we move for the suspension of the measure? Consideration of the measure.
Yes, Mr. President. I move that we suspend consideration of the measure, Senate Bill number 2835.
So suspended.
Mr. President, before we move to the next item, may we recognize some of our guests. We have with us Commissioner NLRC, Commissioner Bel Ortiguera, and Commissioner Ted Villanueva. I move for their recognition, Mr. President.
The presence of our guests from the NLRC is recognized.
Mr. President, with the consent of the Senate, I move that we resume consideration of Senate Bill 2837 under Committee Report 179. This is the bill on the National Labor Relations Commission, Mr. President.
Na-sponsor consideration of the measure is in order. For the record, this bill was sponsored when, Mr. President?
June 9. June 9 is the date.
Sorry?
Of, June 9, Mr. President.
June 9 of 2015.
This year. Yes.
Yes. Please proceed, Mr. Majority Leader.
That is a parliamentary status. I thus move that we open the period of interpellations, Mr. President.
Period for interpellation is in order.
Once more, I move that we recognize this representation as the acting chairman to sponsor the measure.
The acting Majority Leader and acting chairman of the Committee on Labor is hereby recognized.
Mr. President, there are none of our colleagues have signified their intent to interpolate on the measure. I thus move that we close the period of interpellation.
Period for interpellation is terminated.
Mr. President, 1 minute suspension.
1 minute suspension is not.
Ready to resume, Mr. President?
Session is resumed.
Mr. President, we move to open the period of interpellations.
Period for
Forgive me, Mr. President. The period for committee amendments.
Period for committee amendments is in order.
There are none, Mr. President. I move that we close the period of committee amendments.
Period for committee amendments is terminated.
Mr. President, I move that we open the period for individual amendments.
Period for individual amendments is in order.
Mr. President, there are no individual amendments, and from this representation, and none of our colleagues have likewise signified their intent to propose individual amendments. I thus move that we
Period for
close
individual amendments is
the
terminated.
period. Mr. President, I move that
1
we
minute
vote.
suspension before you proceed.
Yes, Mr. President.
Hindi pa introduce. Committee amendments is not being introduced.
Ready to resume,
Session
Mr. President.
resumed.
Mr. President, we've closed the period of interpellation and amendments, so I move that we vote on second reading Senate Bill 2837 under Committee Report number 179.
Is there any objection? Hearing none. The motion to approve on second reading Senate Bill number 2837, which is an amendment to the National Labor Relations Commission, amending Articles 213 and 215 of PD 442, is hereby approved on second reading.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that we suspend consideration of Senate Bill 2837 under Committee Report 179.
Consideration of measure is suspended.
Mr. President, I move for administrative matters the transfer of committee referral on Senate Resolution 1572, resolution urging the appropriate committees to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation into the veracity of the reported harassment, killings, forced evacuations, and dispossession of ancestral lands, among others, in the communities and tribal schools in the Lumad areas in Mindanao, with the end and goal of immediately putting an end to it, meting out the appropriate sanctions to those liable, and formulating legislative measures protecting, furthering, and improving the welfare and well-being of various indigenous peoples and tribes in the Philippines, and Senate Resolution 1573, resolution directing the proper Senate committees to investigate in aid of legislation the reported human rights violations against indigenous cultural communities, indigenous peoples in Mindanao, perpetrated by elements of the armed forces of the Philippines and paramilitary groups. Proposed Senate Resolution 1575, resolution directing the appropriate Senate committee to conduct an investigation in aid of legislation into the possible case of extrajudicial killing of Alternative Learning Center for Agriculture and Livelihood Development, ALCADEV Executive Director Emerito Samarca, Manobo Lumad Leader John L. Campos, and Datu Uvelio Sinzo, that took place on September 1, 2015 in Barangay Giatagon, Lianga, Surigao del Sur, allegedly perpetrated by members of the Philippine Army and local paramilitary groups. Mr. President, the Senate in plenary has made primary referral of proposed Senate resolutions mentioned to the Committee on Cultural Communities, while secondary referral was made to the Committee on National Defense and Security. With the consent of the body, I move to transfer the primary referral of proposed Senate resolutions 1572, 1573, and 1575 from the Committee on Cultural Communities to the Committee on Justice and Human Rights, and the secondary referral from the Committee on National Defense and Security to the Committee on Cultural Communities. I so move.
Before we act on that motion, what about the privileged speech on the same subject which was delivered yesterday Would that also...
Can we also include that in the referral, Mr.
All
President?
right. So the... what?
So if we include that is Senate Resolution 1586, a resolution directing the proper Senate committee to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the report that a school head and the two LUMAD leaders were killed by paramilitary
Is that
gunmen
one?
in Surigao del Sur.
Similarly referred to the
Similarly
committee...
referred to primarily the Committee on Justice and Human Rights and secondarily to the Committee on Cultural Communities, including the interpellations of Senator Legarda, Mr. President.
So the four resolutions and the privilege speech at yesterday's session are all referred to the Committee on Justice as the principal committee and the Committee on
Cultural Communities.
Cultural Communities as a
as
secondary committee.
So moved, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none. Approved.
Mr. President, is it the pleasure of the presiding officer to continue the reference or to do it for another day?
There are just a few. We might as well do it. There are just a few additional reference of
I
business.
move for the reference of business, Mr. President.
Secretary will read the additional reference of business.
Additional reference of business. Committee reports. Committee report number 252 submitted jointly by the Committees on National Defense and Security and Finance on Senate Bill number 1830, introduced by Senator Trillanes, an act providing for an increase in the standing force of the Armed Forces of the Philippines through the recruitment, special enlistment, provisional enlisted personnel, recommending its approval with amendments by Senator Trillanes.
Calendar for ordinary business.
Committee report number 253 submitted jointly by the Committees on Civil Service Government Reorganization and Professional Regulation and Finance on Senate Bill number 2901, introduced by Senator Trillanes, an act providing for a cost of living allowance, COLA, for all employees in the government sector and for other related purposes, recommending its approval with amendments. Sponsor Senator Trillanes IV.
Calendar for ordinary business.
Committee report number 254, prepared and submitted jointly by the Committees on Civil Service, Government Reorganization, Professional Regulation, and Education, Arts and Culture on Senate Bill number 2952, with Senator Soto III, Trillanes IV, and Cayetano P. as authors thereof, an act granting educational assistance and benefits to the dependents of all members of the Armed Forces of the Philippines, Philippine National Police, Bureau of Fire Protection, Bureau of Jail Management and Penology, National Bureau of Investigation, Philippine Drug Enforcement Agency, Philippine Coast Guard, and Bureau of Corrections, who are killed or permanently incapacitated while in the performance of their duty, or by reason of their office or position, recommending its approval and substitution of Senate Bill number 2687, sponsors Senators Trillanes IV and Soto III.
Calendar for ordinary business. Majority Leader.
Mr. President, there being no other business to take up, I move that we adjourn session until 3 o'clock in the afternoon of Monday, September 21, 2015.
Session is adjourned until Monday, September 21, 2015 at 3 o'clock in the afternoon.